Hello, everyone that's chiming in. We're going to go ahead and give about a minute or two for folks to be able to come into our webinar. But for folks that are coming in, if you can drop into the chat box where you're streaming this from, where are you viewing this from, that would be great. Because I know we have a couple individuals from all over the United States and even Mexico here with us tonight. Nice. So it seems like we have some New York folks, someone from Texas, Oregon, Wisconsin, and after a minute or two, this is gonna go really fast. So I might miss a couple cities. A couple folks from LA. Woo, I know. I'm from LA, so I'm always excited. Colorado, Arizona, Florida, DC, Minnesota, SF, Sacramento, more New Yorkers. We have Michigan, nice, Maryland, Escondido. Perfect. So keep them coming. Oh, someone from Mexico. It's always a pleasure to also go international. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and give us one more minute. So keep them coming, folks, and we'll get started really soon. So we have Connecticut, Virginia, a couple folks from New Hampshire, more from Florida, Tallahassee, Fresno, Yucatan Territory, Kansas, and Delaware. So it seems like we might have covered almost all 50 states. Anyone from Alaska? I haven't seen Alaska yet. We have Mississippi, Ohio. I'll be on the lookout a little more for Alaska, see if Alaska pops up eventually. All right, folks, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our Mapping Migraciones Birding Without Borders event. We have some exciting things planned for this evening, including a panel with Netflix birders documentary filmmaker and director, Otilia Portillo Padua, and also various members from Latino Outdoors. And we will also be introducing a new project called Mapping Migraciones, like my background, which is actually a collaborative effort between Audubon and Latino Outdoors. Foremost, I'm Tania Romero. I am the Conservation Program Coordinator at the Audubon Center at Debs Park, located here in Los Angeles, California, and I will be the host for this event. Now, before I delve a little bit more into our panel discussion, I want to chat a little bit about the Netflix documentary Birders. So the documentary aired on Netflix on September 2019, so about 2 years ago, a year and a half. So for folks that have not gotten a chance to watch it, it's a short 37-minute documentary that showcases bird watchers on both sides of the US-Mexico border, sharing their love and enthusiasm for protecting and preserving our bird species. Now, this documentary showcases hawk counters, banders, bird guides, and more, even including local people from both ends. And today we actually have Birders director Otilia Padua here to be able to talk to us a little bit more about the documentary, the inspiration, and a little bit more. So join me in welcoming Ms. Otilia Padua, please. And Otilia, when you get a chance, nice. Always nice to see you. How are you doing?
Hey everyone, I'm in Mexico City and I'm thrilled to be here. It's very exciting to see everybody from all over the United States and Mexico. And it's a huge honor to be part of this, and I'm thrilled to be invited to be here.
And yeah, it's always a pleasure to be able to share space with you. And I know I'm personally excited to actually also meet you because I'm a huge fan of this documentary. So can you share with us a little bit about what inspired you to do this film?
Well, Birders started as an initiative between a production company in Mexico, Mexican production company, and Netflix to do binational stories, short binational stories by either Mexican American or Mexican filmmakers. And the stories had to deal with both countries, but they were open. They didn't have to be in the border, but they just had to have a relationship, a link between the US and Mexico. And when I got on board, they asked me to pitch an idea for this project, and I had a symbolic interest in birds, but I knew very little about them. And one of my random talks with someone, a nature photographer, he mentioned that if I liked birds, I should definitely go to Triunfo to see in Chiapas. It's a cloud forest. I should go to see the quetzal. And so I called the Triunfo people and I said, when are you having a trip there? And he said, well, we have a trip with bird watchers. Would you be interested in joining? And I had no idea what that entailed. I couldn't even I couldn't even hold binoculars properly. So I went with zero expertise on this bird watching trip, and that was my first initiation into real serious bird watching and listers. And I had a lot of trouble seeing the quetzal, but it was a thrill. And then I thought maybe an interesting way to connect Mexico and the US would be through its birds. But I knew very little about it. So I contacted a guy called Rafael Calderon, who's a wonderful ornithologist here in Mexico working in CONABIO, which is the Commission for Biodiversity. And what we started, like I said, well, if I'm going to make a story, a binational story, what place I should go to. And it was getting to the fall. I couldn't really film spring, like the timing of the film. So we started seeing the connection, like, oh, maybe Louisiana, Texas, Tamaulipas, Veracruz. I mean, it was very ambitious at the beginning, Yucatan. It was never going to happen, but it started off being like that. And then so I pitched it. I pitched a migration story, like a road movie where you accompany the birds in their migration path towards the south in the autumn. And they liked it, and they went on board with it.
And now I think it became a really big hit, because I think a lot of us really have enjoyed it. Now, you talked a little bit about, or you mentioned it in the beginning a little bit about having a symbolic, right, relationship to birds. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Like, what does that mean? Like, what was your symbolic relationship?
I think it's I mean, it's probably quite, when I was little, like I saw a lot of birds in cages, and I think that's something that's still happening in Mexico. Like there's a big culture of pajareros, which capture birds from the wild and they get sold. And I grew up in a house where they had birds, and sometimes they were wild birds, and sometimes my aunt would rescue them, but they'd stay in a cage forever. And since I was little, I grew up with this cage, and in Guerrero, in the countryside, and I always felt the impulse to open those cages. I felt there were, and throughout, and then I had this project which dealt with that, which dealt with cages and imprisonments and things about freedom. And so that was more my symbolic approach to birding. It was more metaphoric than actual really knowing where birds come from and what they look like.
Yeah, so feeling this need, right, of like freedom, of being able to liberate in a way.
But also there's this ave de mal agüero, which is in Spanish would be like bird of ill omen. Like, they're premonition, they're premonitory, and there's omens involved with birds. And that I like too. And I remember the ancient Romans, I think they saw flight paths to make some premonitions and all that. There was a lot of things around birding and mythology. And
yeah, that's always been captivating, because I also remember that, in even a lot of museums in Mexico, right, there's whole segments, right, within pottery or ceramics that touch on a lot of the symbolism, for sure, within birds. But yeah, within that, there's also a very similar narrative that people's connection and that relationship through birds is formed, right, through this idea of encapturement, or through this idea of like, I like them, let them be my pets, right? So yeah. Interesting, like I think also analyzing, right, a little bit of like, what those relationships look like and how have they evolved, or like how were they formed. So thanks for sharing, Otilia.
Yeah, someone's saying it's bad omen bird. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, in English as well. So one of the things that I also really enjoyed from the film was your representation of, right, these what we call birders, right? So throughout overall the film, and in Mexico and the United States. And something I enjoyed is that the documentary actually showcased families birding, young people, and also of various different backgrounds. Was it important for you to be able to highlight, right, this diverse representation of birders, and why?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there is a stereotype of what birders look like, and that's been enhanced by films, and that's been enhanced by our own kind of imaginary conception of what a birding looks like. But what I was very surprised to, first I was very surprised to find very different birders here, because I met birders first in Mexico, and then I met birders in the States. So my conception was slightly different, because they didn't all look like what I thought they would look like. And then particularly in the border, it felt like such a mix. Like people were from, like some of them are native Texans, but for example, Madeline, she's Swiss, or Keith, he's from South Africa. So even the white birders had their stories, and they ended up in the border. And then it was very important for me to show that, you know, like this strange place which border towns are, which I bit of Mexico and bit of the US. And so for me it was like a very challenging, and also like very interesting to change change the perception of what we think is a birder. And I wanted to bring young people, and I wanted to bring families, and I knew that because of the duration of the film they were going to have limited time on screen. But I wanted to have the widest range possible, even with the Mexicans one, like Juanita, she's originally from Veracruz. Esteban, he's originally from Michoacan, you know, shorter migrations, but they're still migrants. And so, yeah, and the mother and the daughter, and so, yes, I wanted to have a range of people that look like us and like people we know.
Yeah, and I really valued that, and I know I really enjoyed it, especially because you're right. I think specifically, you know, as someone that is now considers herself a birder, right? Sometimes like that is lost. Like I had never imagined like, oh, my mom can also become that birder, even though, you know, I'm a birder, right? It's like I never imagined like, oh, like she can be like me. And I think a lot of it does have to do with like, you know, the notion, right, that was constructed around this birder narrative.
Yeah.
So next question, you kind of answered a little bit about it, but if you want to elaborate a little bit. So, you know, there's documentaries focused a lot about birds, but realistically birds can be filmed everywhere, especially, you know, in Central and South America, right, that there's such rich biodiversity in bird species. But why did you choose the Rio Grande Valley in Texas?
Well, that was the first place I went to. I thought Louisiana and New Orleans was a little like, no, not New Orleans. I mean, sorry, Louisiana was a little like getting a little bit far and extensive on the migration path. So Texas was the first place I went to, and I was impressed by the complexity of the place, like the geopolitics of the place. And for once, I never understood kind of, until I went there, I never understood exactly what was the relationship of the border wall with the actual border. It was only until I went there, and I went with Joyce, who's also in the panel, and that I hadn't sense that, oh, that the border wall is not really where the border is, and it's a river. And so I felt like that place embodied a lot of the complex issues that we deal with in terms of conservation and habitat in a very, very small, urbanized, complex place. And I was also very impressed by the fact that you had this very, very small park, like nature parks, like in like Quinta Mazatlan, for example, in McAllen. And in Mexico, that would be considered a yard. That wouldn't, you know, here we have huge expanses of wildlife. And it was a place where very visited by birders, and where lots of migrant birds would show up. And so this also gave me this perspective that, wow, like this place is incredibly rich in terms of birding. They come from the West, they come from the East. And it was huge. I think that it was enough in the Rio Grande Valley to make, only there to make a full length documentary with all the issues involved. Plus, you know, the whole, I mean, it is evident that it's a very important migrant route for people, and that's where a lot of people cross.
So, I mean, the Rio Grande Valley is like a confluence of two large migratory flyways. So did you have any idea that, you know, that was happening there, or it was like a coincidence?
I mean, I like my friend when I decided to go there had told me that this was hotspot. but only until I went there did I kind of understood the magnitude. I first went there in the summer, so and then in the fall. So it was early in the summer. It was, so I didn't get to see that much variety, and people kept on talking about spring and how incredible it is. And I've never seen that. I should go back, but yeah. So I knew beforehand, but like nothing prepares you to when you're there, no? Like.
So then you probably had a big shock in when you were there during fall migration.
Yeah, no, I did. I mean, by the time we went there, we were filming. So I was, most of the time I was just stressed. Like, are we going to get this bird? Are we going to, like, what are we going to get? We only have 11 days. We have to cover so many locations. And I don't know what birds we're going to get. And I remember some of the birders were like, we don't know how many birds you're going to get. You're probably not going to get that many. And we had days when nothing showed up as well. Like, and yeah, so it was very rushed.
Got it. So it was a lot of ambiguity to really be able to enjoy even like the huge migration.
Yeah, I was just stressed those 11.
So I think something else that I really enjoyed from the documentary is the ending, the last 2 minutes actually, where you're sharing a little bit about Braulio Malaga's story, where he's comparing right his own like migration journey to the rapaces migration journey, or the hawks, right? And for me, it was a very humbling and grounding ending. Can you share a little bit more about why did you decide to end the film with that story and include it within the film, especially because I think specifically human migration tends to be such a political subject.
Yeah, and the film doesn't try to hide that. No, I think it's evident, but it's still subtle enough so that you don't feel like it's banging you on the head. I think the whole film started like, oh, I'm going to talk about Texas and I'm going to talk about Tamaulipas and how they're separated by this border, how like there's no connection between these people that are very close by. And then we're going to go to Veracruz, which is the funnel of migration where like all these birds meet. And in this funnel, it's where also, in a way, Mexico and the US meet, because there's all these birds coming together to watch migration. And that's sort of when the borders a little bit disappear. But I felt that we also needed a little bit of an epilogue, like a small thing that references you back to the whole journey backwards. And I didn't actually know it was Braulio, the epilogue. I knew I needed an epilogue, like after this festive party where people meet and migration. I overheard, I went to Los Tuxtlas and I thought, there's no chance I'm going to make it to Los Tuxtlas. It's too much. I don't have enough days. But I overheard Braulio telling his story to someone else. And then I realized, oh, Braulio is a migrant. He went through the route and he went back. And then I said, can you tell me a little bit about it? And then I knew I had the ending. I knew this is the ending. He is the ending. He is the one that brings the whole journey back together and to human and what is a migrant. And we've been hearing all along the word, because in English it's different, that you actually use migrants. I've seen migrants to refer to birds. In Spanish, you would say ave migratoria. You would definitely qualify as ave. So the first time I heard that, I thought, like, let's have that play all along the film. And if we close with Braulio, it's all gonna hit back to the spectator, and you're gonna start reflecting of what migration actually entails and what it means to be a migrant.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly, like, you were super successful in that. I think like for me, that's exactly what happened in the end. I think it contextualized everything, and it was very grounding and humbling in the perspective of like, wow, I'm just like a bird as well as an individual, right? Mm-hmm. I also move around, and this idea that it's been a natural process, right, for people to also migrate, right? But the way we have also contextualized it has been very different here, at least within the United States.
Yeah.
And next question, do you consider yourself a birder? And I'm pretty sure this is one of your $1 million questions you often get.
I can no, I think I'm a birder in the making. I'm still really bad at identifying a lot of things. I can hardly identify between warblers. I can identify some owls. I'm very impressive compared to my friends, but my friends think like grackles are crows, and I think I'm in the making. There's so much to learn, and I'm still in awe by just discovering the parks near here and how they change during the fall. And it's very exciting to get the first Wilson warblers, and it was very exciting the first time I could identify Western screech owl near my house. All these things that you discover an entire world that is always there, but you just hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I agree with comments on the chat that's like, no, you're a birder now. You can identify Western screech owl, can now talk about Wilson's warbler and tell the difference between crow and grackles. You're a birder. And if you know more than your friends, I think a definite birder.
I get pictures. The other day they sent me a vermilion flycatcher.
Yeah, so then you're definitely a birder. I think a lot of us can relate to that story. I often get tagged as well. Cool. So I know you said that your documentary, right? This production only lasted 11 days. If you would have been able to do anything differently on this film, add anything, or go a different route, like what would it be?
I mean, in general, I'm quite happy with what we accomplished with very little time. Filming nature requires time and requires patience. And I think we had very little of both. And considering we had very little of both, I think we did really well. I mean, in an ideal scenario, I would have liked to dedicate complete filming time to just the species and to get more diversity, to get more of those shots where you see a little bit of behavior. I think behavior is still something very difficult. You still need a lot of time for behavior of birds. And I think in terms of the documentary itself, I also wished I had more time to develop some ideas, because it's a very complex topic, and the geography and the politics is there. It's always in the subtext. There's always signs that there's something else going on. They're not blatant. There's layers, but I wish that you had a little bit more time to develop on what those layers are. So I think time, and now I have a little bit more experience than what entails to film some wildlife.
Yeah, so time was definitely the biggest struggle.
Yeah, it was.
And we got one last minute question. The last question for you is, are there any differences between the birding culture in the US compared to Latino America?
I think so. I mean, I think here, this is one of the things I would have liked to reveal more in the documentary if I had more time. There is this initiative called Bird Monitors in Mexico, and they're people in the community which have been trained by other ornithologists to do annotation of the amount of birds they see. And this is people from local communities. And this has changed the lives of some people, particularly Esteban, who used to be a hunter, used to eat birds and trap them. And he turned into one of the best bird guides in Mexico. I mean, right? I think he can mimic, I don't know how many bird sounds. And Juanita too, her life completely changed in the Laguna Madre. And a lot of people, these people whose life and social backgrounds they had a lot of scarcity, they're indigenous communities, they're marginalized. This gave them a new way to find a way of living. So there is more of that. I think there's a very a strong socioeconomic difference. They don't have a lot of technology. They have very simple cameras to record. They have incredible shots, but with very simple cameras, and I think that's a difference. There are people that are listers here too. There are people that are very competitive and they have their fancy equipment, but I didn't want to focus on the very expert people with high quality lenses and who made lists. I wanted to focus on the people in communities that had a day-to-day relationship with birds that wasn't through lists, that was through conservation, and that had changed their lives profoundly, that birding had completely transformed their lives.
So birding as that transformative process, right?
Yeah.
Which is really beautiful because when you think about it, like birds also go through that transformative process every year through their molting, right? They lose their feathers and they regrow them out, right? So that's really neat to be able to think about. Well, Otilia, thanks so much for sharing with us. Now we're going to go ahead and transition really quick. But once again, for folks that have not been able to watch it, it is on the Netflix streaming service, and it's really a must watch, especially for birders out there, for folks that are new to this birding community. It really puts a lot of thoughts into perspective. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and transition to our fellow friends from Latino Outdoors. If you have not heard about Latino Outdoors is a unique Latinx-led organization working to create a national community of leaders in conservation and outdoor education. And their mission is to inspire, connect, engage Latinx communities in the outdoors and embrace also cultura y familia as part of the outdoor narrative. That way they ensure their history, heritage, and leadership. Now, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists for the next section: Wendy Garcia, Manuel Belmonte, and Albert Arevalo. So hello, everyone. So nice to have y'all here join me today. Can I have each one of you please introduce yourselves with your name, where did you grow up, and where are you currently now? And what is your relationship to the outdoors? And how about we start with Wendy first?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Garcia. I'm an outings leader for Latino Outdoors San Diego. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I was born and raised here in San Diego, California. Specifically, I grew up in National City and Chula Vista, which is in San Diego County, in the South Bay part. I currently reside on Kumei Islands in Chula Vista, California. And for me, the outdoors, it's just a place where I go to, recenter. I like going for hikes because it reminds me that I'm a part of nature too, and that no matter what stressors I might have going on in my day-to-day life, being outdoors just reminds me that I'm a small thread in a bigger piece of fabric that is humanity. And it really helps put everything into perspective. And I love sharing that feeling with other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Let's go on with Manuel.
Hi, everybody. Hola todos. My name is Manuel Belmonte. I go by he, him gender pronouns. And I'm originally from Orange County here in Southern California. Then I lived in Riverside County. And now I'm living in San Diego County. So all of Southern California, which would be like Tongva, Cahuilla, and Kumeyaay territory. And I think a little bit of Chumash as well. So yeah, I grew up all throughout Southern California. I even spent some time in LA. I had family out there. My cousin that lived out in Southgate spent a lot of time in that area. So now I'm located in San Diego, or the town of North Park. And my relationship to the outdoors is one with a lot of love. It definitely opened so many new doors for me. I remember going on my first hike when I was 18 years old, and that just like completely redefined how I was going to engage with the natural world around me. It was such a benefit for my life that I decided I needed to share this with other folks, and that's how I ended up with Latino Outdoors. So yeah.
It's kind of that transformative process, right? That
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
Last but not least, Albert.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Albert Arevalo. I'm the program coordinator for Latino Outdoors. Before I forget, I saw Eva, Ruby's daughter, chime in on the chat box. I just want to say hello to her. I'm actually originally from Brownsville, Texas. I live in Washington, D.C. now, I live, work, and play in the ancestral lands of the Piscataway Nation. I think especially now during the pandemic, my relationship with nature has been solidified that much more, and I realized how important it is to me. Brownsville, Texas. Yeah. We just got a cuckoo clock, so I apologize if you hear that in the background. But yeah, I'm excited to talk more about my hometown, the birding documentary, and share some space with some fellow Latino Outdoor members.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining me today. Now, I realized I didn't really introduce, like, why did we just have an interview with Otilia, and now why are we talking about Latino Outdoors? So for this second part, we're going to be focusing a lot on what is experiencing nature like in a border town. Now, that was a big conservation topic, right, within the Birds documentary that Otilia directed, right? So we want to go get a little more insight of really, what is that like? So Manuel, Albert, and Wendy are going to share with us a little bit more, what that experience has been like for them. So we'll go ahead on with the next question. So you all are outdoor leaders and lovers, right? And I imagine that y'all have explored the outdoors in different areas and ways. Can you share how your experience in nature in a border town is similar or different to experiencing nature elsewhere? And maybe we'll start backwards. We'll start with Albert.
I'm also getting a little distracted because I'm seeing people from Brownsville, which is exciting. Just for those people, I grew up in Brownsville, or actually right by the airport. So I went to Rivera High School. So if anybody went to Rivera, just a shout out for that. But at least for me, growing up in a border city, I guess the reality is that the minority population is the majority. So it was just normal for me to be surrounded with Spanish speakers and people who, enjoyed similar things like me. So that's something that I really resonated a lot with, just like my community. Playing in the outdoors was just like anything. Like I had, the privilege of having a passport, and I could play in like Boca Chica Beach or South Padre Island, or go to Playa Bagdad, which is in Tamaulipas and Matamoros. So I've had that opportunity where I was able to enjoy nature along the border seamlessly. And it's something that I really loved. It's been super interesting. And I guess the unique part about it is I always joke about what woke me up in the middle of the early in the morning. It was chachalacas. Chachalacas were like our roosters. They were out and about and on the trees, just like clucking up a storm. I'm sure clucking is not the correct term for it, but they were just so loud. But I think that's when I think about home, chachalacas is just immediately comes to mind. And it's just a super unique sound, and they're super interesting birds. And I've really enjoyed just exploring nature with my family in South Texas, because I was there and there was a lot of places that I'd never visited because I didn't know they even existed. And you have people all over the world coming to South Texas, and here we have gems that I didn't even find out about until later in my life. So
yeah, thanks for sharing, Albert. I think Wendy.
Thank you, Albert. So yeah, I agree with Albert the way he said it's similar in many ways. We here in San Diego specifically, we have everything within a 1 hour drive. You can go to the beach, and you can go to the desert, you can go to the mountains all in the same day. That need to be outside and enjoying nature, I think, is inherent everywhere. But specifically in a border town, there are other issues that come along with living along a binational border, like Tijuana and San Diego here. Like Albert mentioned, on the one hand, you're able to sort of enjoy nature in two different countries at any given time if you are privileged enough to have, a passport or be a US citizen. And you can, spend a day here in IB, or you can go down to playas, or a quick drive down to San Quintin, where my family spends a lot of time. But of course, like I said, that's not true for everyone, depending upon citizenship status. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a bit different than elsewhere. Not everyone might feel welcome in certain places, especially our migrant community. For example, one of my favorite places to hike is Borderfield State Park. There's a trail that takes you right down to the beach, and you can actually walk up to the border wall. You're not allowed to touch it, but you can walk pretty close to it. And there's a park within the park called Friendship Park. And so that is a place where people go to gather and visit across the international boundary. And they have a binational garden, and there's a border church, and they do like Sunday communion across both sides of the border. And so I felt like that was a really unique space. It's currently unavailable, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But that is one of the places I think that makes it a really unique way to experience nature on both sides of the border here.
And, you know I was even personally shocked when I even found out such a place exists in San Diego, to be quite honest. But I think we could definitely touch on specifically that area a little later. So I know you all have been able to watch the documentary Birders, or else I hope. How did you react to the film, and what were some of the images or scripts of the film you felt connected to or you found most impactful? And how about we go with Manuel?
Yeah, gracias, Tanya. So I think something that really stood out from the documentary film was when they were highlighting, I forget the woman's name and her daughter, and then you see like Border Patrol like vehicle pull up, and the filmmaker, camarógrafo, is like standing like kind of below, and it looks like they're kind of by a tree, and they have like, I don't know, there's like the sense of like they're hiding, and to me that spoke volumes, because I have countless like family stories of like many family members who migrated here to the US and have their story of when they were hiding from Border Patrol agents. There's also a woman who pointed out that there's this big giant barrier in the way. And also along the same time frame when they highlighted the other two women. And yeah, it's just a giant like wall that's racist and like does a lot of like environmental degradation. And so being here in San Diego and understanding like the types of similar impacts that border wall has along the border really resonated with me. Things having to do with environmental justice and other degradation issues, not just like environmental, but like cultural degradation. There's currently like a huge effort to take land back, #land back, for indigenous folks who are trying to reclaim their space along the border, where this racist border wall is being, you know, spoofed up and built even higher and stronger or whatever. So those were some of the things that came to mind when watching that film. Despite the length of that border, the effects that it has on the people and people that do migrate are very similar and broad ranging at the same time. And so I think that was very impactful. And just her whole juxtaposition of the migration of birds, the migration of people, and what that does, because along with this effort to reclaim land for indigenous folks along the border, I read a report recently that they saw a jaguar really up close to Arizona, and people had thought, oh, they don't come up here that far, they're extinct in this area. And here's proof that it's not true. And here you have a racist ex-president building this border wall, blocking that migratory pattern for a jaguar, you know, that crosses back and forth. And what kind of effects is that going to have on the species? I mean, you can only imagine. So yeah, it was very impactful to see all that on a really short film. I thought it was really well done.
Right, it's like 37 minutes, but it's so jam-packed. And I think just adding on to that portion of like, you know, when they're crossing the border and kind of this feeling of hiding, right? Like we can even say that part of that's generational, because I know when I'm even on the border, like I'm not undocumented. Like I have the privilege to be able to like cross back and forth, but I can relate to that feeling because I don't know why I have to feel like I have to duck down or I have to like hurry up and cross, right? So it's kind of like even that trauma that I think gets passed down generation wise.
Definitely, and just wanted to add really quick. Wendy was mentioning this outing, and you might be talking about it a little bit later too, to the border wall that we did, and I was leading that outing, and my icebreaker for the group that was there, participants of Latino Outdoors, was give me 3 words of what the border means to you. We are brown and we are about to hike to Borderfield State Park, and just want to know what's on people's minds as we're navigating the space as brown people. And I got everything from like joy, opportunity, you know, new life, el otro lado, to like death and sadness and separation and militarization and terror. Broad ranging emotions that come to mind from different brown people that were there that same day. And that was very impactful to hear. And I just had to remind everyone, I'm not trying to set a grim tone for our hike, just want to let people know that, you know, this border wall has an effect on us. It's not speaking, but without words, it's giving us a political message, you know.
Yeah, just the physical item itself, right?
Exactly.
Albert, you want to share a little bit about your favorite parts of the film?
Yeah. Oddly enough, I was doing that exercise, Manuel, like 3 words that come to mind when I think of the border. Home, Tex-Mex. I'm going to use that as 1 word, and like the Gulf, just like the Gulf of Mexico. But I really want to thank Otilia for highlighting, you know, the positive lens of South Texas, especially Brownsville. I think Brownsville came into the spotlight because of the Walmart that was converted into an immigration detention center a couple years back. So people learned where Brownsville was on the map. And the border is more than that. And I think that's something that really resonated with me, is just like, you know, like the tourism economy that birding provides to South Texas. And that's something that is extremely beneficial. That's something that really resonated with me, whether it's like, you know, the economy that's in Texas or in Latin America. So hopefully after this pandemic is over, you know, we revisit these spaces and like, you know, provide, you know, the funds to kind of make sure that these experiences continue. And like another thing that really resonated with me is the scene where folks were going to Sable Palm Sanctuary. So there's like 2 birders and they're in like a gazebo overlooking the Rio Grande River. So to get into Sable Palm, you have to go through like a long dirt road. And before you even go into the sanctuary, there's a big sign that says, there's a big sign that says, through the fence, no passport needed. So you have to go through, you know, this border wall gap, and you're welcomed by like Border Patrol right by the entrance. And then you go over this levee, and then you're finally able to go. And even though this is in the US, like I could only imagine how people who might be undocumented or might not just have trust in any law enforcement might be kept away from like this beautiful world-class facility. But yeah, I mean, like you're welcomed by like this panoramic view of the border wall, which is atrocious. But yeah, I mean, like there's so many beautiful things, like, you know, Laguna Tascosa that was there. I got to see, you know, some birds with my siblings this past winter. I was able to check off a spoonbill from my list, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, like just like the beauty of Brownsville. I mean, I'm bias clearly because it's home. And again, thank you, Otilia, for showcasing like, you know, the beauties of South Texas.
Yeah, and I think it's wild, right, to even think about it as well, because like similar to what Manuel mentioned, like, right, like all the degradation this border does, but in a way, how our birds also somewhat adapt, right, to even find it home realistically, and to even be able to thrive there and really showcase us, right, their beauty, even within these given areas. So thank you both for sharing. The next question I have is for Wendy. I know we have talked a little bit about the Borderfield State Park, and I would like for you to tell us a little bit of what the, sorry, let me backtrack. So I know that you led a hike at Borderfield State Park. Can you share with us a little bit of what that hike entailed and what that experience was like?
Sure. So that was the hike that I joined actually as a participant with Manuel as the leader. I brought my family along with me. And then this was just before I joined Latino Outdoors, but we hiked to Borderfield State Park, as I mentioned. And just as a little bit of background, Borderfield State Park is located within the Tijuana River National Estuarine Research Reserve, which is a truly really important wildlife habitat in the very southwest corner of the United States. It has sand dunes and it has salt marshes, and it's sort of a refuge for some of the endangered birds like the western snowy plover, the California least tern, and the light-footed ridgway's rail. If you walk, there's like signs everywhere, and if you walk too close to where they're nesting, they definitely will swoop down at you, as one of my cousins found out the hard way. As she was walking down, she got just a little too close, and they came and warned her to move out of the way. But so during this hike, we hiked, as I mentioned before, it takes you down the beach and then to the border wall up to Friendship Park. And it was really an impactful hike for me. Like I mentioned, I had my family with me, my dad and my brother and a couple of cousins. And as we were hiking, I kind of got to talking to my dad. My dad is originally a Mexican citizen, now a naturalized US citizen. But he grew up in Mexico, and he was telling us that when he was younger, before the border wall was there, my grandma, my abuelito, my abuelita would bring them to playas on the other side. And they would bring a lunch and just hang out, and they were able to freely cross and enjoy beaches on both sides before there was a giant border wall there. So I thought that was really neat. And I never would have had the opportunity to learn that story from my dad if we hadn't gone on that hike with Latino Outdoors. And once we got up to Friendship Park, I was pleasantly surprised they had Son Jarocho playing, which is from Veracruz, which is a Mexican state along the Gulf of Mexico. And that was really exciting and really lively. They had all sorts of unique instruments. I was most impacted by this man who was playing a quijada, which, if you don't know, is like it's an instrument made from a jawbone of a donkey, I believe he told us it was. And it's basically just the jaw of the donkey, and it still had the teeth, and he was using another bone to play music with it. And so I thought that was really cool. And they just had people dancing, and it was a huge celebration on both sides of the border, actually. So there was people on the US side of Friendship Park, and then there's also a Mexican side of Friendship Park. And if you've ever been to Friendship Park, you'll see that aside from the giant steel bars on the wall, there's also another layer that goes over that is made of really tiny squares. You can't even like put a pinky on there. So you can see sort of like shape on the other side. So even though we couldn't see each other, we were both on both sides. We were all sharing like this wonderful celebration together binationally, which was really heartwarming. And it really just filled me with pride standing on, so-called American soil, but seeing my culture not only represented, but also celebrated by all of these people. And that was really a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, that's such an awesome story, right? And this building a community, right? That I think sometimes when we talk about experiencing nature, we don't think about, oh, we're building community in that process as well, whether it be the outings, right? That you do with, like, you know, other Latino Outdoors members, or even like sometimes us as Audubon leaders, right? But also the community that you can find there, right? And how sometimes even it's the music we hear, right? Or it's the colors we see, right? Or it's just that feeling of like, oh, you look like me, right? That create, right, this community. So thanks for sharing, Wendy. I have one last question for all of you. Or Wendy, sorry, did you want to say something or add on? Okay, I have one last question for all of you. So I know that aside from Latino outdoor leaders, I know you also have a dual role, right? Of also being community organizers and advocates for the Latinx community, specifically when it comes to recreational opportunities. I think oftentimes, right, in outdoor recreation or conservation issues, we often see them as apolitical or independent issues to social justices, I mean, including the border, frankly. And how does that affect the Latinx community and or these border towns specifically? And I think we'll start with Manuel.
Yeah, Tania, thank you for such an important question. I think thinking that, what is it, like social justice issues and outdoor recreation and conservation issues are not connected is starting to become like an outdated way of thinking. Thinking that things are not apolitical, that things are apolitical is just not true with institutions of thought like intersectionality and interdisciplinary. You know, nothing exists without a vacuum, or nothing exists in a vacuum. I didn't show up here in San Diego because I just like poofed into existence here. There was a lot of history that happened in order to put me here where I am today. And so when we talk about like access to recreation and conservation, which are privileges essentially, some folks in the Latinx community particularly don't have the benefit or the privilege or access to engage in those activities. I constantly try and carry like this environmental justice framework within my outings. And that to me is the union of both like recreation, access to clean air, land, water, food, and social justice issues. I think with that term right there, it shows that there is a connection. Being around the border, you can ask something as broad as like, what does, and this might seem like out of left field, but like, what does like a World Trade Agreement have to do with me being able to surf in clean water here in San Diego? Well, because of NAFTA, US companies are allowed to go dump exploitative maquiladoras, factories in the Mexican side. They dump all their waste because they take advantage of lax environmental policies. And that waste is dumped into the Tijuana estuary in the river that Wendy's talking about, and meanders back and forth throughout the border and dumps out in Imperial Beach here in San Diego. So the majority brown communities that live there, what does the World Trade Agreement have to do with their ability to surf? Well, when the floods happen, their oceans are uninhabitable. You can't be in that ocean for a week to a week and a half. And so to say that it's apolitical is a bit naive, or you just haven't done your homework yet. Because everything is political. Silence is political. There's things that happen to keep people silent, and the effects of that silence itself has an effect on people. Just like the border wall had an effect on all of us brown people who were about to hike near it. It wasn't saying anything, but you know, it still had that political effect. And so I guess to think that it's apolitical is detrimental to the Latinx community, because you're not seeing our reality, you're not seeing our struggle. Punto.
Yeah, I think that it's really important, right? Because I think that you're right. I think it is outdated, and I think specifically, right, the more we learn, right, about social justice, we realize that specifically, like, bystanding is also being able to allow, right, these injustices to continue to happen. So even not doing anything, right, is being able to feed, right, these isms, right. Thanks for sharing, Manuel. Albert.
I wanted to echo what Manuel said, is that through the act of silence, there is, it's deafening in the sense that, like, that you're not willing to speak up for or against anything. Like, you want to be neutral, like Switzerland, for instance. But, being vocal about these issues are important, especially for our communities, if we want to be genuine within our, outreach and our engagement efforts. So coincidentally, something that came to mind was a couple years ago, I participated with a couple of LO leaders in the Washington, D.C. area, a songbird migration program outside of the Rock Creek National Park, where there was just like exhibit about migratory birds. And with that opportunity, I was able to kind of talk about migration as a concept. And then I think I was given free will to talk about migration in the sense that it's not necessarily owned by birds. Migration happens and it's natural. It happens in every, species of animals. So that's something we should empathize with, with people that are coming in from, Central America, from Mexico, seeking a better life. I mean, it's, we want to make sure that we talk to our community and we tell them that, like, like, we see these issues that are impacting you because they're impacting us, whether directly or indirectly because of our parents. So we want to make sure that we're like active and vocal. And I think that's something that, we want to continue to do, is like be, leaders in our communities. And yeah, I mean, like nobody necessarily thinks, being outside and playing outside is, a left or a right issue or a red or a blue issue, but there is a lot of privileges associated with just playing. I mean, like, if you think about who has the opportunity to play, that is a privilege on its own. Like, if you talk about wealth inequities, talk about like just access to green spaces, there is a slew of issues. And I think, like, if we do not talk about like the, similar to what Manuel was saying, like, is it a lot of these overlap issues and the interdisciplinary things that are, happening in our lives. I mean, it's not just the simple act of going outside. I mean, there's, a lot of things to unpack, to handle, to make sure that that simple outing is not as simple as people make it seem. So there's more than just like, okay, put on your shoes and we'll go outside. No, that also, in a sense, is a political statement, because we aren't visibly represented well enough in the outdoors, and being outside and being other brown people is a statement on its own.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And thanks for sharing that, Albert. I think something that came to mind, right? I always forget who wrote it, but Audre Lorde. She's like, oh, like, caring for myself is an act of self-indulgence, and that's already like my political welfare. And I think that's exactly what you reminded me of. Like, just the act of being, right, can be political for some of us. Thank you. And last but not least, Wendy.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Manuel and Albert said so eloquently. Social justice and environmental justice are really one and the same. And as I mentioned earlier about Friendship Park, so Borderfield's been closed for about a year now. And at first we were told it was because of COVID and COVID precautions and all of that. And like Albert mentioned, issues surrounding access to these public lands. It turns out it was actually because they're redoing the border wall in that section, but it wasn't something that really was advertised. And they said that they were taking, public comment, but if they're not really letting the public know, then, that's another issue as well, especially since that area is mostly, you know, brown folk that that live around there as well. There is a group called the Friends of Friendship Park that's doing a lot of work with that. And something that they said is, you know, the current restrictions on public access to Friendship Park sort of make a mockery of the notion of the international friendship, which lay at the heart of the building of the park in the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and to which the surrounding Borderfield State Park was dedicated by First Lady Pat Nixon back in 1971 when it was created. And also just wanted to touch briefly on the cultural political importance of, since we're talking about birding, I know it's not a bird, but butterflies, the monarch butterfly is another creature that also travels without borders. And there's a really, I think, impactful quote by Nadine Block, who talks about how the butterfly has been and continues to be an iconic image of the immigrant rights movement. It's, you know, beloved for its beauty and its seemingly miraculous migration across huge distances. She says the monarch embodies hope for those who must travel great distances to survive and find opportunity. And their pattern of migration, as you know, takes monarchs from Mexico to Canada through the United States and spanning lives of several generations, and no one butterfly makes the whole trip. How new generations know to return to their ancestral grounds is really still a sort of scientific mystery. And where the activists who support immigrants, especially in our area, this mystery conveys the message that holding on to one's cultural heritage across generations can be a wellspring of strength for a long struggle. And in the same way that the LGBTQ movement has been represented with rainbows of vivid colors, the butterfly has also now become an iconic image for the immigrant rights movement. And then similarly to the power of coming out is being harnessed by today's undocumented immigrants as well, coming out as undocumented people who are now willing to be open about their dreams of equality and justice. And migration and transformation are what makes that beautiful, both the monarchs and the Latinx diaspora here in the United States. And so I think I agree with Manuel and Albert, how we just have to continue to work towards making the outdoor, you know, welcoming and accessible to everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much, all of you, for really being able to share and really be able to, like, well, not only share your experiences, but your own thoughts and, you know, be behind all these. And it's always, I think, beautiful and like magical, right? To be able to say these things out loud. And I think with other individuals, right, that experience similar processes and experiences. So I really, really appreciate y'all for joining us today and sharing these experiences and stories. I'm going to go ahead and transition for the last 5 minutes. I promise, just 5 minutes. I'm going to transition it to my colleague, Giselle Vanderick, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about the year-long project called Mapping Migraciones, and who's also the mastermind actually behind the creation of the map. And she's going to tell us a little bit about how you can also share your stories with us and be part of this project. So Giselle, whenever you're available.
Hi, thanks, Tanya. Hi, everybody. My name is Giselle Vanderick, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a Dangerman Fellow for Audubon. I'm from Fresno, California area, and now I'm living in the San Francisco Bay area. And I'm excited to be here and talk about Mapping Migraciones. So Mapping Migraciones is a year-long project by Audubon and Latino Outdoors, aimed at celebrating Latinidad, migration, and the stories that connect folks across the globe. And really the plan is to create this interactive map that uses migratory bird data and stories from people like you all on this call to give us a full picture of how birds and people are connected through geography and culture. And so throughout the year, we hope to see the map grow to include more birds, more migration patterns, and more stories from you all. We'll also be having more panels and discussions like this throughout the year to give everybody an opportunity to learn more about the joy of migration. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in a second to show you kind of where the project is right now and where we hope to go. and how you all can get involved. So please bear with me while I share my screen. Okay. So this is a story map that we made for the first phase of this project and that we hope to build on. And for this first phase, we gathered stories from some of the staff, the Latinx staff at Audubon, and that's featured here in this story map. But as this project grows, we hope that we can highlight some stories from you all too. And so to start with the map, oops. All right, so this is the interactive map that we're currently building out. It currently has the 4 stories from our Audubon staff who participated in this first round. But some exciting news, Otilia has submitted her story, and so that should be up on the map very soon, so make sure to check back for that. But how this map works essentially is, as you can see, there are some lines on the map, and those represent different migratory birds and their routes throughout Latin America to different parts of the Western Hemisphere. And so up here in the right-hand corner, there's a drop-down menu that you can click into. And you'll see countries for all of the places that we have stories and bird data for. And so for this example, I'll click Mexico. And what that will do, as you see, is it will show on the map only those birds that are moving from Mexico to other parts of the Western Hemisphere, in this case, moving towards California, West Coast area. And then in this right-hand panel, you'll be able to see some more information about a person who also has roots in that country and a migration story to share with us. And so here you can read about Marcos Trinidad, who is the center director at Audubon Center at Debs Park in LA. And so if you keep scrolling down, this is where you can read the full story, migration story that Marcos had shared with us. I won't read it to you all, but it's a really great story, and we'll share the link for you to be able to read this story as well as the other 3 stories from our very wonderful Audubon staff. And so this is kind of a preview of what that looks like. And under that, we have some information about a bird that's made a similar migration as Marcos and Marcos's family. And so here you can see information about the American white pelican. And we include just some fun facts. This link here links to Audubon's bird field guide, where you can learn even more about the American white pelican. But here we have information about the pelican's overwintering grounds, its croak and barks, its breeding range, and some information about its migration routes. And so, like I said, we are still developing this map. This is an ongoing project. And what it takes for this map to, keep being built out is stories from you all. And so that's what we really would love. And you can fill out a survey that we have, which is linked right here in the story map. We'll also be posting it in the chat for you all. But this is what that survey looks like. It shouldn't take you too long. It's in both English and Spanish. So please feel free to share it with anybody who you think has a story that they'd like to share with us. And I will add that anybody who does share their story and their story is selected to be a part of our map will get a gift of gratitude from us. So another little perk of being part of our project. And yeah, we really would love to hear from you all and read your stories and have you be part of this project. So that's it from me. I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Tanya.
Thanks so much, Giselle. So that is our project that we are launching. So whenever you get a chance, we're going to go ahead and promoting our survey all throughout our networks and through the Latino Outdoor Network. So whenever you feel like you have a couple extra minutes or you're comfortable sharing your story, we would love to hear it, and we would love to start collecting that data for our map to be able to link it to the joy of migration with our bird friends as well. With that said, folks, I'm going to go ahead and end our webinar for tonight right here. I want to go ahead and give another quick big thank you to all of our panelists today, including Otilia Portillo, Manuel Belmonte, Wendy Garcia, and Albert Arevalo. Really appreciate all the insight and all the stories today, and I hope everyone has a lovely evening. Goodbye, everyone.